The reason Hakim wouldn't like Orwell is because Orwell was deeply critical of Stalinism, basically. That's probably the main reason, right?
Literally 1984. Hi there. Did you know that Orwell was just an all-around horrible human being? Well, he was a worse writer, which really is the major issue with him. If you didn't...
He was a pretty good writer. I actually kind of regret that 1984 has been memed into oblivion, because I actually think it's a really intelligent work that lays the groundwork for a lot of interesting, you know, analysis of the way fascism takes root, the mechanisms of social control. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. Obviously, if you're looking for, like, really nuanced, naturalistic, character-driven stories, then he's not the one you would go to. Like, it's all, like, very heavy-handed political allegory. But, you know, Animal Farm genuinely sucks. Well, Animal Farm is literally meant to be, like, a fairy tale. It's like, so Animal Farm is like, then all the rabbits did this, and then this happened, and then it's just meant to be like an Aesop, you know? Like, it's a simple story that at the end you're like, I guess Stalin and capitalism were the same thing, which is true. It's not bad. It's just, you know, you have to know a fable, not a fairy tale. That's right. Thank you. A fable, not a fairy tale. You just have to know what it is.
know, George Orwell was a snitch, a rapist, a racist, a colonial cop, and a CIA puppet, whether
I've been accused of being all these things.
knowingly or unknowingly. His "it's okay to leave your nephew with me" mustache is only the cherry on top. First, about the man himself. The son of a British colonial officer from a wealthy landed family, he began his career as a British imperial official in Southeast Asia, basically a colonial cop. He was a little conflicted by his role, but not out of a conviction against the evils of imperialism and colonialism, but because the, and I quote, yellow faces, as he called them, didn't look kindly at him. In the end, the sneering yellow faces of young men that met me everywhere, the insults hooted at me when I was at a safe distance, got badly on my nerves. Who would have guessed that being an occupier wouldn't get roses rained on you? His entire write-up basically drips of hatred for the local Burmese, as well as a backward...
Who who could have expected that a person born into his position would be racist? It was the early 20th century. Well, I've always found these. So this reminds me a little bit of like the conservative, did you know MLK was a bad person kind of deal? Or like, I guess it would be the equivalent of like a British imperialist saying that Gandhi was actually a piece of shit, which he is, you know. It's more like it's kind of boring in the sense that they actually want to like attack broader things than the personal character of the person, you know. Though I have to say, I'm not terribly surprised by the idea that somebody born in like a colonial, like, yeah, born in a colonial occupation, joined the colonial cops, like they were racist, you know. It's crazy. He was also a bit anti-Semite when he was younger. Well, yeah, that's also not terribly surprising to me. But you know, whatever. It's good to know, right? No heroes and such. Oh yeah, like conservatives are really big right now on saying, did you know actually Abraham Lincoln was a really bad guy? Because, you know, like, obviously their main issue is that they want to own black people as slaves, but they can't say that openly, so they have to be like, did you know Lincoln actually killed 3 million Americans with his da-da-da? So, you know, it's one of those arguments by proxy kind of things. Not to compare Orwell to Lincoln. Lincoln was a pretty cool guy. They're both cool guys in some respects.
Logic where imperialism wasn't bad solely because of the processes that made it up, but because the colonized expected a certain attitude of a colonial official that Orwell himself found difficult to fill, apparently. Let's quote the man.
Oh, so wait, why? Oh yeah, this is the shooting an elephant thing. Wasn't this basically like George Orwell was asked to shoot an elephant, even though the elephant wasn't doing anything, and the experience kind of jarred him because he felt like he was just a tool of the imperialist system. Like there was no reason to do it. It was just he was taken aback by how, for no reason, with social pressure, he was compelled to do something he didn't want. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why some people will be virulently racist, but then they'll be like really sympathetic to dogs that are abused in shelters. You know, the idea that a lot of people have around humans is that when bad things happen to human beings, it's possible for them to deserve it. Because humans have like a moral will. We're capable of learning and making bad decisions, whereas dogs, elephants, are sort of innately amoral in the sense that they don't have the capacity to be good or bad. They just kind of exist. And I think that it kind of makes sense in the logic of racism, if you can call it logic, I guess, in the structural assumptions of racism, that somebody might be jarred by unnecessary violence against an animal in a way that they wouldn't against a human, but hopefully that can be kind of like a learning moment, which it was for Orwell. So, you know.
Of a colonial official that Orwell himself found difficult to fill, apparently. Let's quote the man some more, shall we? All I knew was that I was stuck between my hatred of the empire I served and my rage against the evil-spirited little beasts who tried to make my job impossible. He repeats this pattern often, says something incredibly racist, but turns around with a, oh, but I don't really like empire all that much either. Between uninspired and unconvincing prose about disliking empire, though he still found it quote-unquote respectable, whatever that means, he falls with,
kind of a weird quote out of context there. Respectable can mean a lot of things in this context. It's an essay about him rejecting imperial logic. Is this Hakim? Yes. And yes, his logo is Lenin. His Ransona is Lenin.
Thought that the greatest joy in the world would be to drive a bayonet into a Buddhist priest's guts.
Okay, now let's employ a little bit of critical thinking here. So this is an essay about him rejecting colonial logic and expressing his distaste for colonial logic. When we read this passage right here, is Orwell referring to a feeling that he currently has or a feeling that he used to have? Is this a rejection of previous thoughts and feelings that he's had? Or is it an embracing of this position? Is he saying this right now to go, and I still believe it? You know, I thought the greatest joy in the world would be to drive a bayonet into the Buddhist peace crust, comma, and I still do, Is that what he's saying? I believe he's taking this quote in bad faith. He just might be. Again, my issue here isn't with, like, Orwell or defending Orwell. The main thing is, like, man, I wish people could do this shit in good faith, you know? I feel like I could construct a pretty good takedown of Orwell if I wanted. I just, you know, Hakim is a tanky. So obviously, like, you know, he has, like, strong ideological biases that are going to inform his takes here.
Mighty authoritarian of you, Eric. Hold on, if he hates the Burmese and uses these terms, then surely a self-proclaimed socialist would have even harsher words for the most notorious fascist of all, right?
Whoa, wait, what? Wait, that is the biggest leap. So wait, this essay, when was that essay written? Shooting an elephant. When was that written? Published in 1936. So like, is this gonna be like, okay, did you know that in this one sentence, he was describing his previous feelings towards the Buddhists in a negative way, but 8 years later, he said something that didn't sound as immediately negative about Hitler? Okay, all right, it's just dumb. Like, imagine cherry-picking so hard that we're literally jumping not only from time to time, but from time to time, subject to subject, and then the first quote we're using is one of a position we're criticizing in ourselves. Why is Hitler here? That's a good question. Why is Hitler here? Me at God.
Let's have a look. I should like to put it on record that I have never been able to dislike Hitler. I have reflected that I would certainly kill him if I could get within reach of him, but that I could feel no personal animosity. The fact is that there is something deeply appealing about him. One feel.
All right, let's go find the essay. George Orwell, Mein Kampf review. I should do a Mein Kampf review. So this is 1940, so this would be at least 4 years after he wrote the elephant essay. Okay, so Control F, appealing. Here we go. So I'm going to continue this. One feels it again when one sees his photographs, and I recommend especially the photograph at the beginning of Hurston Blackett's edition, which shows Hitler in his early brown shirt days. It is a pathetic, dog-like face, suffering under intolerable wrongs. In a rather more manly way, it reproduces the expression of innumerable pictures of Christ crucified. There is little doubt that is how Hitler sees himself. The initial personal cause of his grievance against the universe can only be guessed at, but at any rate, the grievance is here. He is the martyr, the victim, Prometheus chained to the rock, the self-sacrificing hero who fights single-handed against impossible odds. If he were killing a mouse, he would know how to make it seem like a dragon. One feels, as with Napoleon, he is fighting against destiny, that he can't win, yet somehow he deserves to. The attraction of such a pose is, of course, enormous. Half the films that one sees turns upon some such theme. So, employing a little bit of critical thinking here, it seems like this entire essay, at least this portion of the essay, is on Hitler's use of mass media and rhetoric to portray himself as a martyr burdened by the infinite weight of the universe. Appealing here is used in the literal sense, as in he designs himself to be appealing. It's very eloquently written. Yeah, he was a writer. Did you know that? He's talking about the way Hitler has constructed his image. I would think the phrase, "I would certainly shoot him if I saw him," would be enough of an indication as to his position on this. But considering the fact that Hitler was, at the time of his, life, legendary for being a powerful orator, it seems to me that this is an effort to express why he's such a powerful orator. You understand? Like, the point that he's making here is, okay, so this man deserves to be shot. But why is his message, why is the way he speaks so appealing? What about what he says? Like, how many leftists have you heard say Donald Trump sounds incredibly appealing when he speaks to the American working class? Have you not heard that before? Like, think for a moment. Can you not think of another example of a leftist saying this fascist, this enemy of the people, is appealing in the mannerisms with which they speak? So Hakim is just cherry-picking parts of this essay to make his point? Yeah, I think he's being pretty overtly dishonest here. But look at the last sentence here. Now that we are fighting against the man who coined it, we ought not to underrate its emotional appeal. See, we go back to that word appeal, appealing. This is a statement not on his personal feelings towards Adolf Hitler, but rather a statement on his optics. Why does he dislike Orwell? Because George Orwell didn't like Joseph Stalin. At least that's what I'm guessing.
Feel no personal animosity. The fact is that there is something deeply appealing about him. One feels, as with Napoleon, that he is fighting against destiny, that he can't win, and yet that he somehow deserves to.
Notice how the way Hakim is cherry-picking these quotes, the way he's doing it is to make it seem like Orwell is actually endorsing Hitler because he's a dishonest piece of shit, as opposed to writing a broad essay. Like, you could easily find like a lefty essay where they're like, and one speaks of the appeal Trump has with the Rust Belt working class. Donald Trump goes to the podium and he, one feels as you listen to him that he really is a rejection of the deep state status quo. And then you clip chimp that and you're like, see, he supports Donald Trump. Nah. How many times have you seen lefties on Twitter say, dude, Donald Trump is so funny, I can't hate him? Imagine somebody unironically quoting that and going, see, this person can't hate Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. This is a Donald Trump supporter. You see that every day. I see that messaging all the time. Lefties say that constantly. But again, Hakim's trying to be dishonest here. So,
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, he's with his rant Sona, he's like, ooh, got him with that. Like, finds a 2-second clip of Hassan saying, dude, I love Trump. And he's like, see, Hassan loves Trump.
The simplest benchmark for any reasonable human being is to have a burning hatred for fascism. But apparently...
see, they say Hassan is a leftist, but he said I love Donald Trump. You just heard it in that 2-second clip.
Even that's too much for Orwell. Instead, in the height of World War II, he says the willingness to criticize...
Clip, chimp. I consider the willingness to criticize Russia and Stalin the test of intellectual honesty. Yeah. Okay. See, I told you it was because he didn't like Stalin. You don't have to be very intellectually honest to criticize Hitler. Every imperialist in the West was doing that outside of Germany. Whereas leftists' willingness to criticize Russia and Stalin would end up being one of the great tests of their intellectual credibility. Yeah. He's clearly here talking about, look, Letter to John Middleton Murray, published in the Collected Essays, Journalism, and Letters, George Orwell, Essay Please. Who was John Middleton Murray? An English writer? Got kind of a creepy Hannibal Lecter face here, doesn't he? You know what I mean? Wow, he did a lot of stuff. Oh, he was a Marxist. That's nice. Supported the small independent socialist party, a regional breakaway of the independent labor party. Again, if we're engaging in a little bit of, I guess, honest analysis, I think it's pretty clear here that he's saying that as leftists, or as people with leftist sympathies, criticizing Russia and Stalin is our test of intellectual honesty. Would you really say criticizing Hitler is the test of intellectual honesty? That's the bar we're setting for leftists? Oh, I can tell this leftist is trustworthy, has good opinions, and, is intellectually honest because they dislike Hitler. The bar that I have set, that definitely isn't a little bit too low. On the other hand, criticizing Russia and Stalin did end up being a pivotal breaking point for a lot of lefties. I don't like Hitler. Where's my PhD? Exactly. Me too. Hey, where's my PhD? I just have a bachelor's. Oh, hey, got a fat baby down here. Yeah, and it still is. You're completely correct, Orbados. Or Orbados. Um, the willingness to criticize Russia and Stalin is still, to this day, a test of intellectual honesty for lefties.
Criticize Russia and Stalin is the test of intellectual honesty. Yes, echoing many a reactionary and liberal in red paint we see today.
No. Reactionary and liberal, first of all, reactionaries right now defend Russia. For two, liberals didn't mark criticizing Russia and Stalin as marks of intellectual honesty because that would have been as straightforward to them as criticizing Hitler would have been to lefties. That's like a baseline. You seriously think that liberal academics are like, oh, this guy's intellectually honest. He doesn't like Stalin. Like, seriously? I don't think he understands the point that was being made there. I used to think Hakim was smarter than these people.
That's not to say that one shouldn't criticize, etc., etc., but there's a time, place, and format where it's...
How are you going to say there's a time, place, and format when you're clip-chimping the articles randomly from across time and space? Like pulling a quote that Orwell wrote while he was, like, shitting in a public bathroom in London. Like, there's a time and a place, mister, to be criticizing Stalin.
It's most constructive, if your criticism is good faith to begin with. And the middle of a fascist takeover of Europe and beyond isn't it. See my video.
Sorry, guys. You're canceled as a... Listen, Hakim totally understands criticisms of Stalin, all right? But if you do it from any time in between 1939 and 1945, you're actually aiding Hitler.
Video on left-wing anti-communism for more about this perspective. Let's move on to his list making. Orwell reported on his friends and acquaintances to the Information Research Bureau, a dedicated organization within the British government founded in order to publish anti-communist material and fight revolutionary, anti-colonial, and pro-independence movements.
Okay, so this I'm actually interested in learning about because I've heard for ages that Orwell was a Fed. But then I've heard people say the only people that Orwell reported to the state were Stalinists, who I don't give a f about. So I guess I want to know, like, did he actually report lefties or did he report Stalinists? Yeah, Vaush, it's the latter. Oh, well then, hey. I don't give a f. They're not my comrades. Hey, you guys, listen, Orwell literally fought in Spain. Do you know what happened to the anarchists who fought in Spain? The Stalinists turned on them and started shooting the anarchists in a way that ended up aiding the fascists. There were fascists, anarchists, and Stalinists in Spain, and the Stalinists turned on the anarchists and gave the fascists the upper hand. I don't give a f if Stalinists are reported to the state. I don't give a shit. It's like reporting Nazis, except Nazis have killed fewer anarchists than Stalinists have.
This office not only got the rights to Orwell's works, but also directly translated and published Animal Farm and his other garbage works into 20 languages on every continent on Earth. In fact, Orwell's entire literary reputation is due to direct CIA and other anti-communist organization efforts at popularizing his nonsense, which is
Based CIA.
Is telling because his work on the face of it really is unimpressive. Regardless, back to the list. He lists Paul...
Dude, he's so mad. He's like 50 times now. He's like, well, despite being a bad author. Unfortunately, and this is pretty undeniable, there has been a protracted effort, deliberately and probably kind of like organically, to frame 1984 and Animal Farm as works that are critical of communism or of socialism. If you are even remotely familiar with Orwell, or even very good at, like, reading at all, you will realize that they are not. What they really are is they're critiques of revisionism. They are critiques of reactionary anti-communist movements after communist revolutions that take over and use a kind of twisted logic of socialism in order to justify the institution of authoritarian governance that is completely distinct from communism in every imaginable sense. Really? Yes, really. Animal Farm is a fable which is about how the animals lead a little revolution to determine their own lives and independence, but more and more power is consolidated into the vanguard part, I mean the pigs, and eventually, at the end, the pigs are essentially collaborating with humans to sell off animals on the farm for the profit of the pigs, and it was impossible to determine the difference between the pigs and the humans. Whereas 1984 is about a kind of pseudo-mythical socialist revolution that ended up creating, across the world, a collection of ultra-authoritarian political parties, you know, and these parties are nominally socialist, but in reality, and this is explored within the text itself, you don't need to be some kind of academic to realize this, it is incredibly clear that the parties will weaponize some kinds of disinformation and anti-logic as a way of securing people's complicitness in ultra-authoritarian scenarios in a way which seems on a very surface level to be representative of some socialist ideals, but in reality is a betrayal of those revolutionary ideals. Like, it's not really that subtle. You just have to read them. You know, it's not like I don't know how much more obvious you can get than in 1984, the vast majority of people are referred to as proles, and they are considered to be subhuman animals by the people in power. And the people in power, referred to as the party, have the exact same relationship with proles as like some kind of like Hitler-esque totalitarian state, corporate fascist commune would have over them. And they routinely assassinate proles who have like any revolutionary sentiment. It's a little on the nose, yeah. It wasn't subtle. It was really good. I think it demonstrating its point. You should reread it if you can. There's so much to go into.
Robeson, arguably one of the most famous people of the past century, airbrushed out of history because of his communist leanings, as very anti-white, a Wallace supporter in his snitch list.
Who?
Because of his Paul Robeson, arguably one of the most famous people of the past century.
Paul Robeson. I love calling people anti-white. This guy. Robeson is Pog. Is Orwell mentioned on this page? It's not mentioned on this page. Okay. Paul Robeson Orwell. Can't trust anything Hakim says. Here, Orwell's list. In 1949, shortly before he died, the English author George Orwell prepared a list of notable writers and other people he considered to be unsuitable as possible writers for the anti-communist propaganda activities of the Information Research Department. Okay. Let me see. Where's Paul Robeson on this one? Paul Foote. Paul Robeson. So I guess he did call Paul Robeson anti-white, though I can't really see anything that relates to that. This might have been an L on his part. Henry Wallace supporter. Was he? I don't know enough about Henry Wallace. Before my time. It's Robeson, not Robeson. We'll take this one on an L for Orwell. He was very brainwormy near the end of his life. Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Airbrushed out of history because of his communist leanings, as very anti-white, a Wallace supporter.
I love calling people anti-white, and also Henry Wallace supporters.
In his snitch list, with zero evidence either in reality or within his deluded mind, aside from a typical racist presumption that wanting non-whites to be treated like human beings must mean you hate all whites as well. He diligently notes...
Wallace continued to serve as Secretary of Commerce until September 1946, when he was fired by Truman for delivering a speech urging conciliatory policies towards the Soviet Union. What does that have to do with what Orwell said? I think Orwell might have been like super ultra anti-Soviet Union towards the end of his life. So it's possible he might have like considered that an overriding moral impetus over everything else.
Non-whites to be treated like human beings must mean you hate all whites as well. He diligently notes Jew and Jewess next to people many times incorrectly in a time where
Yeah, that's not good.
European Jews had just faced the Holocaust. Deutscher, Polish Jew. Dryberg, Tom, English Jew. Chaplin, Charles, Jewish?
George Orwell, after his DoorDash gets delivered, you know, 5 stars. Do you have any additional comments to add? Open parentheses, Jewish? Question mark?
My guy, why is this so important to you? It makes you think. He also kept a paranoid list of names for himself.
Bird watching, you know, saw a Jewish finch, yeah.
By the way, with the same weird pattern reproduced. Some liberals like to pretend that the lists were only to prevent these people from working for the Secret Service, but naivety is a liberal pastime, and so is absolute faith in nefarious institutions like the IRB, which played a significant role in things as diverse as the Suez Crisis and the Troubles.
Well, obviously that's also cope. Even the Paul Robeson thing in his Wikipedia article said that he was denied a passport because he was suspected of being a communist sympathizer, and this, like, he was one of the people named by Orwell. So, yeah, obviously, like, during the 1940s and 50s, like, telling your government, like, hey, these people are communists, did have consequences. That was not just, like, an idle thing that you did. I don't know what this has to do with the Troubles, but yeah, obviously. Orwell was just predicting those Pulse Schizo posts where they list anyone who breathed within 10 feet of being a Jew, of being Jewish. Yeah, for sure.
Why you wouldn't want people who could sabotage the propaganda efforts of an empire you supposedly hate so much, I have no idea, but it is telling.
Well, being charitable, I think a lot of the people that he was suspicious of here were probably Soviet sympathizers, and Soviet sympathizers can't actually sabotage the propaganda of an empire you despise in a way that you would like, because he also despised the imperialist empire that was the Soviet Union. Do keep in mind that as of Orwell's death in what was it, 1949 or sometime a little bit after that, the Soviet Union had more colonial territories than England did. After the war, the West lost most of its colonial territories. You know, Britain lost India, whereas the Soviet Union had the entirety of the Warsaw Pact. Paul Robeson was an okay dude. The problem is he was a victim of Soviet propaganda. It was led to believe the USSR was an anti-racist workers' paradise. To be fair, keep in mind that before the whole tanky thing, before the failed like secession movement in Hungary, a lot of people in the West, even a lot of smart, good faith people, did genuinely believe that the Soviet Union was like building socialism. I think George Orwell was a lot smarter than those people in the sense that even looking at what Lenin did back in 1919, you could pretty immediately understand that things were going revisionist pretty much right away. But a lot of people were hopeful that Stalin was building a kind of like workers' paradise.
You'd also have to be incredibly gullible to think lists of leftists, anti-colonial figures, minorities, etc. were done in good faith and for a good purpose. Regardless,
That's true.
as a liberal darling, all of his obvious ignorance and suspicion of Jews, LGBT people, and blacks is skated over without a peep or mention. Had any other post-war leftist made remarks of this kind, you'd for sure know about it, and their problematic nature would litter the prefaces of their published works. Yet, no mention. Liberals are...
I'm pretty sure that if you take a look at famous authors from the 20th and 19th centuries, and you were like, okay, but how many of these guys have said racist stuff? You would probably get like a 100% return rate on that. I don't think that George Orwell is often thought of as like a leftist theorist, though he kind of is. I think George Orwell is mostly thought of as like a controversial, like socialist sympathetic with a mixed history who ended up writing some of the most like influential works on socialism. You know, whether people like it or not, it's true. And I don't, but people don't really like list him alongside leftist analysts, so I don't really know. I don't know how you'd categorize him, really. He's written stuff that's more theory adjacent. He's written on, like, fascism more directly, but people know him for his books, for his fiction, not for his, like, essays.
So intentionally blind that they claim his attempted rape of his adolescent girlfriend was a quote-unquote botched seduction, in which she had shouted, screamed, and kicked before running home with a torn skirt and bruised hip.
You shouldn't do this, by the way. This is my lefty analysis of this situation. You shouldn't do that. It's not good.
Yes, that's apparently a botched seduction to liberals, when a 190cm tall man corners and forces himself onto a tiny 150cm tall woman.
Yeah, this is top V advice, right here.
Back to the video in just a second. Let's hear from today's sponsor, Atlas VPN.
No!
For a lot of research that I do for 2019, Atlas. And you'll get to see below. Alright, back to the video. That's not it, though. Arguably, his magnum opus, Animal Farm, was written in 1943 and
1984 is better than Animal Farm.
44, yet not a mention or room in his mind for condemning fascism as it was ravaging Europe.
Wait, yes he did. Wait, the book was a condemnation of fascism. Okay, alright.
Only power at the time actually kicking Nazi Germany's teeth in being the Soviet Union, which he spent...
That's not true. The Soviets allied with the Nazis. They tried to go for shared land pacts. They ended up invading Poland together. Hitler was the one who betrayed their compact, not the Soviet Union. If any other country had formed a tactical alliance with the Nazis, lefties never would have let them play it down. It is only the Soviet Union is given the charity of, well, they had no choice but to ally and do war with the Nazis for multiple years. Anyway, yeah, the Animal Farm is mostly about, like, yeah, you're right. It's about Leninism, Stalinism, vanguardism. Though, if you're based in red-pilled like myself and George Orwell, you know, it's not as though Stalinist Russia wasn't fascist. That's why Hakim dislikes it. I like the implication here that you can't produce any work which is critical of revisionism because fascism exists at that time, you know? I thought lefties, especially tankies, were all about, like, constant internal critique. But then, like, George Orwell writes a book, which is a pretty severe condemnation of the behavior of the Soviet Union. It's like, ah, well, Adolf Hitler is alive-ish while you're writing this, so, you know, you can't do that. Orwell did have a weird description and one-sided female character in 1984 that was constantly sexualized. Wait, what? Constantly sexualized? That's because they were having sex. I don't think she was... I don't think... Julia, was that her name? It's been a while. I don't remember. I remember her being sexualized in the sense that they f***ed. Also, sex and eroticism were pretty important to the story of 1984. Like, half the lines is about how much Winston wants to rape her. No, they're not? With respect, I think you were severely misreading the text. He's hanging out with Julia, and he's thinking like, damn, I want to grab her ass right now. That's not thinking about how you want to rape her. He just wanted to all the sex they had was consensual. Am I misremembering? At the beginning he was? At the beginning of 1984, he was like insanely depressive, borderline suicidal, and he hated her because she was attractive and a aggressive member of the party, and he was dead inside, and he was a whirlwind of... He was a incel. The book was him overcoming those feelings when he actually got to know her. Like, do you think it's an endorsement of his perspective at the beginning when he's still a loyal party member? Like, 1984, like, you're meant to go, oh yeah, Winston in the first 40 pages. Like, that's the man we want to be. TBH, I still think that's weird. To want to grab somebody's ass? If anything, I would say that the beginning of 1984 was a really salient examination of the way in which misogyny is used to further far-right sentiments. Because in a way, Winston's seething hatred for Julia was a component of his institutional complicitness. You know, there's a reason why O'Brien was trying to abolish the orgasm, you know. The idea that sincere love between two people can end up like breaking the chains the party has over you is one of the core themes of the book. So at the beginning, his inability to feel love actually makes him more vulnerable to the mechanisms of the society that he was born into, you know? Yeah, the reason he hated her at the beginning is because he wanted her to love him. And again, like, the book is not endorsing this attitude. Winston's a freak.
And the entirety of the war, as well as his life, condemning and...
He says he wants to ravage her. Okay, have you never heard the term ravage used in a consensual sense, ever? Like, ravage isn't just like a Warwick ultimate cooldown in League of Legends or whatever the f***. It can mean, like, you want to f*** good. Okay, no, we're moving on. Stop. Read the book. It's more common with boomer writing.
Satirizing. At the same time, during the war, the IRD, which he would work for, was making connections with Ukrainian nationalists, of which many directly aided the Nazi Einsatzgruppe.
Hey, Ukrainian nationalists. Yeah, let's go. Slava Ukraini. Where's the guy? Who's the Banderite? Where's Bander? Where's Bander in chat? Banderin.
As they went about their program of a mono-ethnic Ukraine without Jews, Poles, Gypsies, and Communists. There's even evidence to suggest that Orwell knew and approved of this. To quote a great...
Where's that evidence?
Article you should read. Isaac Asimov also points out a shocking fact that conveniently escapes the myriad disciples of the British author. George Orwell spent the peak years of genocidal destruction of World War II writing a childish story about how evil the Nazi-killing Soviet Union supposedly was.
Wow, what a novel perspective. While World War II was happening, he criticized the Soviet Union. He criticized Stalin rather than Hitler. Remember, even though lefties are supposed to engage in constant internal critique, remember, you can't actually criticize the Soviet Union when there's another bad country, all right? You can't actually do that. You're not allowed to. He already wrote a critique of fascism before that, though? Yeah, he did. He'd written on Hitler plenty before. But the real... Like, this is what I mean about cowardly criticism right here. And Asimov is doing the exact same thing here. The idea that over the course of, like, a 6-year global war, you are incapable of criticizing the, let's be clear, very bad Soviet Union because Hitler exists is ridiculous. You know, that's absolutely silly.
As Asimov points out, Orwell wasn't much affected, apparently, by the Nazi brand of totalitarianism, for there was no room within him except for his private war with Stalinist communism.
How dare he focus on one thing when there is another thing? These are such limp-dicked critiques.
Consequently, when Great Britain was fighting for its life against Nazism, and the Soviet Union fought as an ally in the struggle and contributed rather more than its share in lives lost and in resolute courage, or
Well, hold your horses there. When did the bombing of London begin? Because I'm pretty sure for a good portion of the attack on England, the Soviet Union was an ally to the Nazis back in 1940. And Operation Barbarossa began in June of 1941, which means there would have been a gap of nearly a year where London was being bombed. But the Soviet Union was an explicit ally of Nazi Germany. Just the narrativizing here, man. Yeah, plus in 1940, most communist parties were supportive of the Nazi-Soviet alliance or quiet about it, so there was need to speak up as a leftist. That's true. Yeah, it is a little weird. You know, you can gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss me all you want. I'm not going to stop saying it's kind of weird that the Soviet Union allied with the Nazis. Oh, well, then they would have lost. Okay. If France had allied with the Nazis rather than lose to them, do you think you would have been like, oh, well, France had no choice? Bullshit. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Come on. Like, yeah, France is like, oh, well, if we hadn't allied with them, then we would have lost our territories. So actually, we had no choice but to join with them and use our armies to help them and share an invasion with them. Oh, yeah, just like the USSR and Nazis divided Poland, we, too, will divide England together. This is actually necessary, tactical, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so pathetic. Lefties will bust out every single possible excuse they would never, ever, 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 ever allow for any other country. Vicky France, Vaush? Yeah, but that was post-conquest France. That wasn't the existing government of France choosing to ally with Nazi Germany. That was France being taken over by the Nazis, and then Nazi sympathizers were put in power. That was a puppet government. That's completely different. Vicky, not Vicky. 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 Oui, oui. Vicky. Oui, oui. Vichy. Vichy! There we go. Vichy, franc. There we go. Thank you. Vichy. Vichy. That's kind of fun to say.
Orwell wrote Animal Farm, which was a satire of the Russian Revolution and what followed, picturing it in terms of a revolt of barnyard animals against human masters. He completed Animal Farm in 1940.
Is that what it was about? That's crazy.
And had trouble finding a publisher since it wasn't a particularly good time for upsetting the Soviets. As soon as the war came to an end, however, the Soviet Union was fair game and Animal Farm was published. In fact, Orwell went out of his way to manufacture a fantasy that couldn't possibly be mistaken for Nazism, because, as everyone knows, the people and ideology that materially supported every single genuine...
Oh man, dude. Like, listen how mad Hakim is that he was criticizing the Soviet Union. That's all this is. The literal explicit criticism being made right now of Orwell is he criticized the Soviet Union. That's it. It didn't even get published until after the war. He's still seething over it. So, be clear. The only thing he has trouble with here, it's not the circumstances under which Stalin and the Soviet Union were criticized. It is just that they were criticized. Animal Farm was published. Yeah, when was Animal Farm? Wait, was it really in 14? Sorry, oh my god, I'm so stupid. 1949? Was it really that far back? No, it was originally published in 1945, which was still after the war. Yeah, in 45. Okay, 1949. Yeah, 1449. How prescient. Can you imagine? Out of nowhere, man. It might have gotten like more broadly published afterwards, right? You know, like it got a limited release to begin with. Published in London back in 1945. Yeah, dude had his eyes on the horizon. Listen up, guys, okay? I know you all speak Middle English, and I don't even make sense to you, all right? But in 500 years, fascism will be a thing, and so will Stalinism. Listen, just read this book. Don't do this, okay? The Ukrainian edition had a censored preface. Well, Ukraine back in 1945 wouldn't have had, like, the freest laws when it comes to public expression criticizing the Soviet Union, I imagine. This would have been like an American nationalist getting mad about somebody criticizing Japanese internment because the Japanese were worse than Americans and America was the major power fighting them. Literally, because the argument being made at this time is like, how dare you criticize a country fighting the Nazis when the Nazis exist? And it's like, okay, so So are England and America. Should we not? How can you? How dare you produce implicitly pro-Nazi propaganda by pointing out our Japanese internment camps? You piece of shit. You Nazi. How dare you say that we shouldn't lock people up for their national origin and ethnicity? What the is wrong with you? You piece of shit. Like, it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Hakim does not mention the elephant in the room that Orwell's actions were motivated by a personal hatred of anyone associated with the USSR due to the fact of how Stalinists and foreign agents working for Stalin worked to undermine the activity of the anti-Stalinist left during the Spanish Civil War. Is he going to bring up the Spanish Civil War? I don't actually think this includes it. Is he going to leave that context, like, out of this? Are we really going to talk like that? That's going to be the thing that we leave out of this piece on George Orwell, is like the time and the place that a lot of his positions were cemented? I don't think so. He's been talking about Orwell like a do-nothing shut-in. Okay, well, just to complete the picture then. Homage to Catalonia is George Orwell's personal account of his experiences and observations fighting in the Spanish Civil War for the POUM militia, that's Workers' Party of Marxist Unification, of the Republican Army. Republican in this case, Loyalist faction or the government faction was the side in the Spanish Civil War, 1936-1939. Government of the Spanish Sovereign Republic against the nationalist faction of the military rebellion. Published in 1938, about a year before the war ended, with little commercial success. It's actually a based book, beautifully written. I read part of it, but not a full thing. There was a chapter online somebody suggested I read back when I started the channel, and I did. It was really good, but I didn't read the full thing. I should though. I think he can mention it because Orwell's involvement in the Spanish Civil War is basically a defeater for everything else he said thus far. Yeah, there's probably a reason why he doesn't want to bring this up, you know? This war was one of the defining events in his political outlook and a significant part of what led him to write in 46, every line of serious work that I have written since 1936 has been written, directly or indirectly, against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism, as I understand it. So basically, the Spanish Civil War was, so you had a country called Spain, and then there were fascists, and the fascists fucked up the country so much and for so long that Spain took a seat out during World War II. Imagine your country being such a mess that it doesn't get involved in World War II, despite being in Western Europe. Just to have an understanding of how bad the Spanish Civil War got, that's how bad that it got. And then the fascists won. So, you know, thank you, Franco. I'm willing to bet that the image you guys have seen most from the Spanish Civil War is this one. Marina Guineseta, I believe her name is pronounced. You've probably seen her. She was one of the revolutionaries. She was a communist, born in France, who became an iconic figure during the Spanish Civil War. Did she die? That's a good question. No, she died at 94 in 2014. Wow. Okay, so she died recently. So, nice. Okay. Homage to Catalonia. Excuse me. The Republican side, which viewed the nationalists as fascists, they were, was made up of several factions, including socialists, anarchists, and communists. There was infighting between these factions, which Orwell details in his chapters in the May Days of Barcelona. Infighting between the socialists, anarchists, and communists. What happened there? Oh, nice chapter-by-chapter summary. I assume that this will include the chapter which describes the infighting. Orwell explains the divisions within the Republican side. On one side of the CNT-FIA, the POUM and the section of the Socialists standing for workers' control. On the other side, the right-wing Socialists, liberals, and communists standing for centralized government and a militarized army. He also writes one of the... Oh, man, did the liberals on the side of the Republicans ally with the Stalinists? Did the Stalinists work together with the liberals in order to purge the anarchists because liberals, right-wing socialists, and communists all together were in favor of consolidation under the state, and it was the anarchists exclusively who weren't in favor of that? Oh, that's great, dog. He also writes, one of the dreariest effects of this war has been to teach me that the left-wing press is every bit as spurious and dishonest as the right. Oh my god. True to form? Yeah, it's classic. Nothing changes. Phenomenal. Hold on. Let me, May Days of Barcelona. May events, a series of clashes between the 3rd and 8th of May 1937, during which factions of the Republican faction of the Spanish Civil War engaged one another in street battles in various parts of Catalonia centered on the city of Barcelona. In these events, libertarian socialist supporters of the Spanish Revolution, such as the anarchist CNT and the anti-Stalinist POUM, which opposed a centralized government, faced statists, such as the Republican government, the Catalan government, and the Communist Party of Spain, which believed, oh my god, the communists sided with the liberals. Oh my god, I can't. Oh my god. Imagine being a fucking based anarchist in the Spanish Civil War, and then the Stalinists work together with the fucking libs because they're so pro-state that they would rather ally with liberals than anarchists. That's so crazy, man. Tension was rising. The POUM leaders were vilified and accused of being covert Nazi agents under a false revolutionary propaganda of being enemy agents infiltrating the country. The POUM had come to propose an invitation for Leon Trotsky to reside in Catalonia despite its differences in him. The POUM leaders were becoming increasingly wary during the spring of 1937. Tension in the streets of Barcelona becoming evident. Anarchist patrols. On the 26th of March, Tarradellas banned members of the police from having political affiliation and demanded all political organizations to hand over their weapons. Thus, anarchists withdrew from the government. One of the Generalitat of Catalonia. Open crisis force. Anarchists retained their weapons. After a violent confrontation, several men were killed. In Barcelona, fear began of an outbreak of open warfare between the anarchists and the POUM against the government and the communists. Each side formed weapon caches and secretly fortified its buildings for the fear that its rivals would attack it first. Caches, not caches, but caches sounds really fun to say. Chronology, preliminary events. Who started the shooting? Who started the shooting? A force of 200 police officers commanded by the Minister of Public Order of the Government of Catalonia, Eusebio Rodriguez Salas, went to the Telefonica Central Exchange and presented itself at the censorship department located on the second floor with the intention of taking control of the building. The anarchists saw that as a provocation since Telefonica was legally occupied by an anarcho-syndicalist committee, according to a decree on collectivization from the Generalitat itself. Rodriguez Salas, on his part, had authorization from the head of internal affairs of the regional government. The anarchist workers opened fire from the second floor landing of the censorship department. Salas phoned in for help with a company of the National Republican Guard arriving alongside two control patrols heads. Ceasefire resistance. Surrendered their weapons not before shooting through the windows to empty their ammunition. A crowd had gathered, and at first it was believed the anarchists had captured the head of the police. The POUM, the Friends of the Durity Group, and the Bolshevik Leninists and the Libertarian Youth took positions, and after a few hours, all the political parties had taken out the weapons they had hidden and began building barricades. From that skirmish, battles began in different parts of the city. Several hundred barricades were built, and police units occupied roofs and church towers. The PSUC... From the rooftop, various grenades blew up several police cars. Neat. Early in the day, the leaders of the POUM proposed to the Barcelona anarchist leaders the formation of an alliance against the communists and the government. The anarchists refused immediately. A bunch of fighting. Most of the Barcelona proletariat supported the anarcho-syndicalists. Oh, really? Most of the people in the city, most of the proletariat in the city supported the anarcho-syndicalists, so they actually had the support of the people. But the Republicans and the communists had the support of the government and of Stalin, respectively. That's cool. It actually is crazy how objectively, historically, we are the good guys and they are the bad guys every time. With all of the resoluteness and decisiveness of a cartoon fairy tale, we are objectively the golden shining light of goodness on the hill. And all these pieces of shit are just so objectively bad. It's crazy, man, every time. Literally like mustache-twirling villains, yeah. Yeah, we are Harry Potter, we are Han Solo, we are Rocky. That's true. Yeah, thank you. There's a lot here. The May Days had profound and long consequences. They showed that anarchists would not act with a single voice, unlike on the 18th of July, 1936. A gap opened between the anarchist ministers, who were absorbed with winning the war, and the anarchist youth, who were above all obsessed by the triumph of revolution. Also, very influential personalities like Escorza and Garcia Oliver lost control of their own followers. The crisis showed there could be no truce between communists and the POUM. The Generalitat of Catalonia was restored to its old functions with the entry of one representative of the UGT, one of the CNT, and one of the RC. Some of those responsible for killings were tried later, but only in Tarragona and they were sentenced not to death but only to imprisonment. Oh, well, that's nice. The Generalitat of Catalonia, the communists and the central government seemed willing to act together against extremists by force if necessary. The new director of public order in Barcelona soon restored normality in much of the judicial system, but in that way the communists could take more easily their crusade against the POUM. Crusade? The Republican authorities took no more measures against the CNT and the FAI because there's still great power and high level of public support. The POUM situation was quite different, as the Republican government soon outlawed the party on the 16th of June and arrested its main leaders, including Julian Gorkan and Andrei Nin. The POUM would disappear, and the anarchists would never intervene in the war as before. Ultimately, the internal disputes tore the Republic apart and was a burden on its internal unity against the rebels, i.e. the fascists here, the Franco. Other consequences were the fall of the government of the victory, led by Largo Caballero, and the departure of the 4 anarchist ministers represented in it. It was also a clear victory of communist influence and power in the Spanish Republicans. And then they lost! And then they lost to the fascists, and it stayed fascist until the 70s. Thanks, statists. So much for actual existing communism. All right, moving on.
Genuine liberation and independence movement in existence are the true evil. Of course, not a single line critiquing American genocidal policies globally or their...
Whoa! Why would he critique American genocidal policies globally? They were fighting the Nazis. What, are you pro-Hitler? Why would he critique America when they were fighting against the Nazis at that time? Huh? You pro-Nazi? There's a war going on. There's a time and a place.
Their constant warmongering and saber-rattling, and their sanctions and bombing of poor third-world countries trying to detach from colonial regimes that...
I can't hear you over the sound of Hitler existing.
...oppressed them for decades if not centuries. Nothing on the Spanish or French or Portuguese.
Nothing on the Spanish? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. George Orwell's position on Francoist Spain was so subtle. Oh my God. He shot them. What? Oh my God. Are you? Yeah, because this is the reason why he didn't include anything about the Spanish Civil War in this video. So now here at this point, he can sort of giggle as he includes in the script the implication that George Orwell's position on Francoist Spain was in any way, shape, or form ambiguous. He took a bullet to the neck. What a Weasley little liar.
His only genuine vitriol and whatever passed for criticism, oscillating between childish storytelling and verbose ranting, was
mad, so mad, holy shit, mad.
Exclusively...
How dare you criticize Stalin? How dare you criticize the USSR? How dare you?
reserved for socialist countries, and specifically...
Not socialist, by definition.
...the USSR. A country he never visited, never read about, and never interacted with the politics.
Never read about? Can you substantiate that claim in some way? Also, of course he didn't visit. They would have killed him. Are you kidding me? The guy who published Animal Farm? Yeah, dude, that guy is going to enter the famously pro-writer, free speech, okay with its own government being criticized USSR. Hey, come on down to the USSR, Orwell. Look, we've got a gigantic wedge of cheese on this fascinating wooden and wire contraption, okay? Here, come here. You called this guy smart? Yeah, I don't know. Hakim used to be smarter than this. He's pretty retarded now, but whatever.
Of. This point can't be understated. Orwell actually knew next to nothing about the USSR.
He never read anything about... In fact, he didn't actually know what the USSR was. At all. He had no idea. It was just sort of instinct guiding him to write books critical of it. You know, he never read anything. He never heard the term even.
And the misconceptions and ridiculous caricatures he reproduces both in his writing as well as his commentary are so easily corrected by...
Is he going to correct them? Is he going to correct them, though? Because he hasn't actually engaged with the content of either of these books. These are the two pieces of material that George Orwell is most known for by far, and his only mention of Animal Farm is to confirm that it is, in fact, get this, a criticism of the Soviet Union. That's the only thing that he's managed to say on either of these books. That's the only criticism that he's offered. You know, the scathing rebuttal of Orwellian thought that is, hey, did you know it's about the USSR? That's all he said.
By the lightest possible research as to essentially solidify the fact that he was simply happy in his ignorance. Or in...
Substantiate. No?
Is one or the other. By the way, if you thought Animal Farm critiques Stalinism or whatever
Hey, whoa, don't. No copyright.
other made-up concept, it doesn't. The
Whatever made-up concept? What? Made up? Stalinism is a made-up Did he not exist? What the f does that mean? Okay.
fundamental thesis of Animal Farm is that the working class is stupid and cannot be trusted to lead any sort of independent political existence.
What? No? It was the opposite. It was that they were taken advantage of by the smooth-talking pigs who were representative of the Vanguard Party that, under Lenin's governance, immediately disbanded the workers' councils. The animals on the farm weren't stupid. They were uneducated. Most of the Russian citizenry at the time were like peasants. They weren't literate or barely literate. What? What? Is he suggesting that the book's position was an endorsement of Napoleon and Vanguard Party rule over the farm? Okay.
To quote Jonas Manuel, a Brazilian organizer and professor of history, Orwell spends the entire book describing generations of animals as easily confused, dumb, stupid, illiterate, amnesiac, the entire book.
They were peasants. They were liberated by forces they barely understood. They weren't given the opportunity to educate themselves. Didn't they end up at a time trying to rise up against the pigs, some of them? Didn't multiple members of the animal farm try to oppose the pigs and then they got disappeared? They were uneducated and the state, Napoleon, disappeared them. Orwell was actually optimistic about the revolutionary potential of ordinary people. Who could blame him? He sided with the anarcho-syndicalists during the Spanish Civil War, and apparently they were the ones the proletariat in Catalonia supported the most. This guy has failed every single literary analysis assignment ever given to him. Yeah, man. When I was in high school, I always thought, like, dude, English class is so dumb. We all know how to read. What's up? And now that I'm a adult, now that I'm almost 30, I'm like, holy shit. We should have never let any of these people ever do anything other than English class. I know that Hakim is Iraqi, but I think they should have like airlifted him and brought him over to an American English class and had him sit there for 20 straight years after the Iraq War began, which was about 20 years ago, solely so that he wouldn't have made this retarded video. This is insane. It's horrifying. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
The main target of this book's critiques aren't revolutionaries or communism, it's the working class. George Orwell writes from an aristocratic ethos.
Insane perspective, like actually psychotic. Schizo perspective right here. No amount of drugs could bring me to this mental state. Actually insane, like genuinely psychotic.
Elite theory posits the people as incapable of self-governance, without the capacity to constitute themselves as a political subject, and therefore always the object of dispute and manipulation by vying elites.
It has been known to be the case that the working class is manipulated by the ideology of the ruling class. I read that from Marx. You know, that has been known to be believed to be a thing. Okay.
The people lack the capacity for political self-determination, cannot build a political program or engage in autonomous political action. This is George Orwell's theory.
They were disappeared by the pigs when they tried to do this. The pigs literally like hired dogs to be their police, to keep all the other animals in line. They were denied this ability. Yet, like, the funny thing is right now what he's doing is critiquing the same thing the book is critiquing, which is the Vanguard Party. The explicit point of the Vanguard Party that Lenin wrote the necessity of is that the people are not capable of leading a revolutionary body themselves, and you need an elite group of academics, scholars, and political visionaries to do the work for them. The whole point of a Vanguard Party is that the proletariat can't do this work themselves. That is the position Lenin had. That was being critiqued in Animal Farm.
Borne out by his choice of metaphors. Animal Farm isn't a critique of revolutionaries, it's a critique of workers. It's an aristocratic manifesto against the working class.
Psychotic, methamphetamines, cocaine, crack, heroin, any opioid, infinite drugs. Nothing could bring me to this take. I have no idea. Insane. Absolutely insane. Where's the crack pipe? That's right. There we go. I could do this for hours, and I could never arrive at a position this incorrect.
Class. This book, Animal Farm, is a deeply reactionary book, displaying aristocratic condescension against the people, a book in which the working class appears as imbeciles. It displays all the...
Unironically, though, this is actually a very common Stalinist line to people who critique Stalin or anything about the Soviet Union, where they will say essentially that the Soviet Union's government was a perfect representation of the will of the people, and if you critique the Soviet Union's government, you're actually critiquing the people and saying they're ignorant buffoons. They essentially ignore the whole Marxist bit of, you know, the ideology of the ruling class is the ideology of the people, and they argue like, well, you have an issue with what Stalin did. Well, you must think that the average person is a retard. Nice reactionary theory, dipshit. And I've heard this a lot from tankies. It's like a very dishonest criticism. I don't think they actually believe it. I think they know they're lying.
Marx is the bourgeois genre of elite theory. Its historical metaphors for Soviet history whitewash capitalists and imperialists. The USSR is shown as self-sabotaging while its enemies are completely...
Its historical metaphors for Soviet history whitewash capitalists and imperialists. How? At what? At the end... At the end, the point is that that Lenin isn't that different from the Tsar. The whole point at the end is that you can't tell the pigs and the humans apart. So if the whole book is about how bad the pigs are, and then at the end it equates the pigs and the humans are meant to be the Tsar, would that not be? Okay.
Absolved. This is George Orwell and is why he was so successful. I highly recommend you read the article. It's great and full of citations to further bolster the point.
Yeah, also, Animal Farm doesn't really have anything to say on imperialism. Like, I'm sure you can read into it from that lens, but the book just isn't really about it. It's about that farm. They don't, like... at least if they do, I don't remember it. They don't, like, go conquer a bunch of other farms. I think it's just that farm. Another classic, like, Stalinist or tanky leftist analysis thing is to randomly bring up imperialism with the implication that any salient critiques from a white person must be motivated by some implicit, like, pro-imperialist position. I'm often accused of this. Like you could make any, point on any issue, and somebody on the left who secretly wishes they could be genociding kulaks or Ukrainians or whatever, will say like, that's a very imperialist point of view, even if you're talking about your favorite ice cream flavor. It's just, it just happens all the time.
I don't want to subject you to excerpts of Animal Farm, after all. By the way, his hatred for the working class...
Wouldn't want to show you any examples, by the way. Wouldn't want to substantiate any of the points that I've made with a single bit of evidence from the actual text. No, I know. Don't worry. I know.
Was even noticed by the people who fought beside and absolutely hated Orwell in Spain. 1984,
What?
on the other hand, doesn't even deserve to be commented on.
So just don't do it. Just move on right after that. Literally, just move on right. Like, his most influential work. Okay, and just move right on from that. Like, yeah, okay, no, we're not even gonna.
To quote Asimov again, I read it and found myself absolutely astonished at what I read. I wondered how many people who talked about the novel so glibly had ever read it. Or if they had, whether they remembered it at all. I felt I would have to write the critique if only to set people straight.
Okay. That didn't even say anything. Okay.
By the time 1984 came out in 1949, the Cold War was at its height. The book therefore proved popular. It was almost a matter of patriotism in the West to buy it and talk about it.
Oh my god. It's more how dare you criticize Stalin. He's not actually going to criticize the books. It's, you can't criticize Stalin during World War II because then you're pro-Nazi. You can't criticize Stalin after World War II because then you're pro-capitalism. Frankly, you just can't criticize Stalin, okay? Like, there was one window of time during which you could criticize Stalin, and it was during the, I don't know, the 3-day gap between World War II ending and the Cold War. Not even then. F you. You can never criticize Stalin.
Perhaps even to read parts of it, although it is my opinion that more people bought it and talked about it than read it, for it is a dreadfully dull book, didactic, repetitious, and all but motionless.
Ameliorate, sagacious, ameliorated.
I generally recommend you read this entire review as well. The critique is excellent and really goes to show not only how...
Then why didn't you include any passage of the critique that actually critiqued the book? It's one line. It's Isaac Asimov being like, much as I would like to critique this serpendipitous book, I am beset by tiredness and must ameliorate to bed. And then Hakim is like, look, own this guy. Orwell's BTFO.
Bad the book is, but also how the literally 1984 types don't even bother to engage with the book. And of course, the incredibly ineffectual and childish criticism of vague or otherwise undefined symbols of power. Keep in mind...
Vague or undefined? Oh my god, man. They haven't read the book. They haven't read the book. Undefined? The whole book is about defining them and the whole book is about them. There's nothing vague in 1984. The whole book, it's not abstract. Every system of power is directly addressed. There is, guys, for those of you who haven't read 1984, at some point while writing it, George Orwell was like, okay, hold on, this might still be too subtle for some people. And the characters in the book find a book written by powerful people that just describes all of the metaphor and abstraction and systems of power that they've encountered up until that point. Literally, in 1984, Winston finds a book called 1984, the book, and reads it, and it's like, okay, so here's how everything works. And it's, I'm not joking here, like 50 pages in the book. It's like 2 chapters in the book. The spark notes of the book are in the book. You can't vague. Oh my god. He knew people needed it. Apparently people needed more.
Mind though that Asimov himself is a liberal at the end of the day, so some of his politically oriented comments
Communists allying with liberals yet again.
Suffer the usual deficits. Of course, the elephant in the room that Orwell would love to shoot is his supposed leftist conviction.
The essay was that he didn't want to shoot the elephant. Maybe he didn't read that one either.
To quote a fantastic article from Red Sails, it is mistaken to imagine that children in the English-speaking world get Orwell's work drilled into them like a mantra because somehow genuine socialists managed to sneak his work past a censor that banishes the likes of Karl Marx and Malcolm X.
What? The only people who misunderstand George Orwell's 1984 are those who try to go about imagining it as a leftist message. It is mistaken to imagine that children in the English-speaking world get his work drilled into them like a mantra because somehow... First of all, children in the English-speaking world do not have 1984 drilled into them like a mantra. Second of all, it's not because genuine socialists sneaked his works past. The work is critical of Stalinism, which liberals often are. Third of all, how is the Grapes of Wrath included in high school reading lists then? The Grapes of Wrath, the Dust Bowl, is a pretty explicit anti-capitalist book. Like, you would really struggle to read it in any context that is not critical of capitalism. Yeah, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair as well. Yes, sometimes that's included in high school reading lists. Is that like a secret psy-op? Like, yeah. 1984 is one of the most banned books in America, Vaush. Is that true? 1984 banned America. That makes sense. George Orwell's 1984 has repeatedly been banned and challenged in the past for its social and political themes, as well as for sexual content. Additionally, in 1981, the book was challenged in Jackson County, Florida for being pro-communism. Damn. Well, that really throws a wrench into the narrative here that 1984 is included because it's some, like, ultra anti-communist. Dude, imagine being so retarded that some dumb parent hog in Jackson County, Florida, correctly identifies the book as being pro-communism and you couldn't figure that out. Imagine considering yourself a scholar on communism and some red-faced, bloated dipshit from Jackson County correctly analyzes the book's themes in a way that you can't. How embarrassing, dude. Holy shit. How miserably embarrassing. God damn.
From the beginning, this supposed socialist had published everything he could in a personal crusade against Marxism, as opposed to his preferred, quote-unquote, respectable English social democracy. This fact...
The CIA actually did fund it, if I recall correctly. Hey, please keep in mind that the institution most insistent on referring to China as a communist country is the State Department, okay? Trust me, whether or not the CIA does or does not support a narrative is not really a good indication for whether or not it's true. There are 2 people who want to call China communist, okay? It's the State Department and tankies. there is an insistence on some elements of our government to refer to countries which are not communist as communist, because it heightens the perception of them as a global threat. Tankies want to do the same because they're retards and never read Marx. And, you know, with regards to 1984, you have this like weird, like kaleidoscope of views around it where people are accusing it of being different things for different reasons. Though I would struggle to find a perspective more incorrect than the one being shown in this video. This is a hog could step forward and say that 1984 is pro or anti-communist, and I think either interpretation would be more correct than what Hakim is gasping for air at here.
Did not go unnoticed by the CIA and practically every other anti-communist outlet that existed. To quote, between 1952 and 1957, from 3 sites in West Germany, a CIA operation codenamed A Dinosaur launched millions of 10-foot balloons carrying copies of George Orwell's Animal Farm and dropped them over Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, whose air forces were ordered to shoot the balloons down.
It's like the an earlier and more fun version of the Chinese balloon kerfuffle. Imagine if the F-18 shot down the balloon and a bunch of Mao's little red books fell down.
Even the Animal Farm film, forcibly shoved down millions of kids' throats the world over, was entirely financed by the CIA, a secret they kept for decades.
F-22.
It was entirely produced in Britain too, because the CIA feared that plenty of talented animators wouldn't go along with such a blatantly anti-communist message. The very script and ending was edited to be even more negative and anti-communist afterwards.
Don't copyright.
As the CIA thought it still seemed too sympathetic. All in all,
I wonder why they would think that. It's anti-USSR, definitely not anti-communist. You might note that in both 1984 and Animal Farm, the behaviors the books are most critical of are authoritarianism, statism, censorship, propaganda, and the consolidation of power. You guys realize that, right? No matter who you believe the pigs or the party represent in Animal Farm in 1984, respectively, the behaviors that are being criticized are those. Authoritarianism fundamentally, but broadly, statism, consolidation of power, propaganda, and censorship. I mean, Winston literally works in the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Censorship. To read those themes as anti-communist, like as a socialist. So to consider yourself a socialist, as Hakim mistakenly does, and to believe then that these themes are anti-socialist is to reveal that you believe socialism is about authoritarianism, state consolidation, censorship, propaganda, and all these other things. It's a massive self-report. Any so-called socialist who takes offense at the themes of 1984 is telling you that they would happily shoot you in the back and rape your wife if given the chance. They're monstrous people. Because not only... They aren't just criticizing the book from some abstract, oh, it's communism, we don't like communism, blah, blah. They're criticizing the book because they see in its critiques themselves, and they don't like being called out for those reasons. They're demons wearing human flesh. Never trust them. Never trust an ML, under any circumstances.
Orwell was just a garbage person. Personally, politically, professionally, the human equivalent of a clogged toilet. To quote Parenti, safely ensconced within a virulently...
I will say it's impressive, though, to make a 14-minute video on Orwell without including a single passage from Animal Farm or 1984.
Communist society, Orwell, with Orwellian doublethink, characterized the condemnation of communism as a lonely, courageous act of defiance. Today, his ideological progeny are still at it, offering themselves as intrepid left critics.
See? Look at what Parenti is telling you right now. Oh, did I slow it down? My apologies. I'm going to speed it back up. Parenti is a dumbass. That is true. Well, I shouldn't say that. Parenti is a smart guy, but like many people who are otherwise smart guys, he's sympathetic to Stalin and the Soviet Union. And for that reason, he's actually a dumbass. Isn't he a lib? Well, Stalinism is just spicy social democracy. You know what the difference is between so-called communist country? Yeah, here, I'll tell you the difference, okay, between social democracies in the East and social democracies in the West, okay? Social democracies in the East required a bloody revolution to get to, and social democracies in the West just required some sensible post-war governance, all right? Imagine being Ho Chi Minh and blanketing your country in blood, and at the end of it, you get something that is akin to a social democracy, but worse in every conceivable way. God.
Critics of the left, waging a valiant struggle against imaginary Marxist-Leninist Stalin
Worse
hordes.
Sweden.
May he and his ideological progeny rot like their brains often already do.
Imagine being worse than Sweden. You gotta work for that one. Nope. All right, nice one. Didn't we have a revolution and civil war over our social democracy? In Sweden? I don't think so. Did Sweden have a civil war? I think that the real the real reasons that social democracy took off in some parts of Europe after World War II were because wartime destruction left a lot of cities kind of open, and there was a lot of room for rebuilding. And also there was a broad critique of reactionary politics because, again, the Nazis just lost, you know. So people were more sympathetic towards left-leaning voices, including social democrats. America is not a social democracy, but we didn't have a revolution for our social democracy because we don't have one. But also our revolution was about the founding fathers wanting to pay less taxes. We had a civil war, but the civil war was about slavery. Orwell literally criticized pacifists in the UK who wanted peace with Germany. Oh yeah, that's true. Orwell was the person with the famous line on pacifism. That's right. Pacifism is objectively pro-fascist. This is elementary common sense. If you hamper the war effort on one side, you automatically help that out of the other. Nor is there any real way of remaining outside such a war as the present one. In practice, he that is not with me is against me. So this was him being so anti-fascist that he wouldn't tolerate any henpecking or fence-sitting when it came to being anti-Germany. Obviously, nowadays, lefties are the kings of fake pacifism as a way of implicitly aiding the enemy. That's their primary position on Ukraine, where they will pretend to be pro-pacifism when in reality their actual position is to aid the Russian war effort. Wow. Well, that ended up being a whole 90-minute segment right there, or maybe 80-minute segment. My goodness. How was that, huh? Feel like we talked a lot there. Yeah, leftist meme. A whole bucket of bummer. Yeah, well, that's okay. It's good to do one of those longer video reviews. I like how you watch the whole video. I like watching the whole video as long as it's not really boring or really repetitive. Hakim is many things there, but he's not boring or repetitive. The videos are constructed in a way that move along, you know. But if it's like a 25-minute video, and I tend to pause so often anyway, and I feel like after 9 minutes, like all the points have been made, but they keep happening over and over and over again. Like, yeah, eventually, of course, I'll, you know. Ho Chi Minh shouldn't have called himself a socialist, but he didn't also ask for the bloodshed. That's not actually true. Ho Chi Minh actually had a policy for killing a proportion of all the people that he came across. Oh, that sounds kind of simplistic, but I think that's actually what it was. There was like an edict put out by his army that there was like an execution mandate for a proportion of the... Man, what was that called? Oh, the landowners? Hold on. Yeah, but landowners is a really broad term, okay? Imagine like ginning up a bunch of like peasant soldiers, giving them 2 days of drill training, and then saying, hey, you have like free permission to kill people that fit into this social category, you know? It led to a lot of unnecessary death. Hold on. Ho Chi Minh death quota. God, that sounds so rad, dude. Holy shit. Death quota. A lot of people died. Yeah, okay. More than 172,000 people died during the North Vietnam campaign after being classified as landowners and wealthy farmers. I would not trust that classification. I mean, literally, we're talking about traveling through the jungle as a bunch of barely trained, like, Vietnamese soldiers. You could just find a family, accuse them of being landlords, like, rape them, kill them, and then it's like, oh, yeah, they were landlords. Sorry, whoops, move on. That with, like, that's... I mean, ultimately, Ho Chi Minh apologized for this. Ho Chi Minh apologized publicly for the the terror that he caused with his edict. So it wasn't... It's not like it's just me saying this. He apologized. Just an oopsie. Bleh. The land reform was a massacre of innocent, honest people, and using contemporary terms, we must say it was a genocide triggered by class discrimination. No, I don't think that's true. I wouldn't count a genocide based on class discrimination, but the records on whether these people were wealthy or landowners was like not reliable. Not to mention, keep in mind that like Vietnam was largely agrarian at the time. Do you have any idea how common land ownership is in agrarian societies? Like, imagine going out into the American Midwest during, like, the 1890s. Basically, everyone you come across is going to be a landowner. They're all farmers. they're all farmers. Tankies accused Radio Free Asia as a CIA source. Okay, Ho Chi Minh literally apologized for this. There was a video of him apologizing for this. So that, you know, they can say this is a CIA source if they want. They go back in time and assassinate CIA agent Ho Chi Minh. Show it? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to find some specific terms here. Ho Chi Minh apology, land reform, genocide. I don't know if he would use the term genocide, but maybe other. No, we've seen this on stream before. I know it exists. In fact, I think part of it was in a Luna Oi video. Okay, in 1956, Ho Chi Minh apologized for the severity of the reforms, saying, "Because I lacked a spirit of democracy, I didn't listen and didn't see." Literally, eto e. Bleh. Here, let me see if I can find the source on that. Source. Lack the spirit of democracy, yeah. What are the reliable numbers for total killed by Ho Chi Minh? So we don't have like a Radio Free Asia source, I guess. Total killed by Ho Chi Minh. Arthur Domen estimates the Viet Minh assassinated between 100,000 and 150,000 civilians during the war. That's probably not good. By comparison to Domen's calculations, Benjamin Valentino estimates the French were responsible for about 60,000 to 250,000 civilian deaths. That's probably also not good. Unofficial estimates range from 200,000 to 900,000. Okay, I don't know if I believe 900,000. Oh, it should be worth noting, by the way, that while Ho Chi Minh did a lot of gamer apology shit, I actually support the broad project that he had. The control that the French had over Vietnam was inexcusable. I obviously don't support the Vietnam War. So like the Ho Chi Minh did a lot of had quite a few gamer moments, but I feel like in the long run, like ousting the French was objectively, like morally the right thing to do. And we should not have intervened on behalf of the French because we were upsetty spaghetti that they got ousted, you know. Like, Ho Chi Minh was kind of a piece of shit, but, like, in terms of the piece of shit scaling here, like, who's worse? The French were worse. You always oppose the French. We learned that when we were doing our research on Burkina Faso and Thomas Sankara, right? You always oppose the French, okay? That's an axiom right there. The U.S. also intervened because of domino theory. Yeah, and domino theory was, like, bullshit. Fuck domino theory. I hate dominoes. China also intervened after Americans to try, as well to try to take out Vietnam. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, China's always like vied to be an imperial power in its region as well, with some success. What about in terms of the English still oppose the French? If I feel like after World War II, the French became the bigger bad guys in global imperialism than the British did. The British lost a lot of their territories, but didn't the French still control like half of Africa? Hold on. When was Africa decolonized? If I remember correctly, after World War II, France had, like... Okay. French colonies list. List of French possessions and colonies. From the 16th century to the 20th century. The French, they had a lot of... It was Vietnam. They had a lot of stuff going on, you know? They were doing a lot. Of course, we have the Louisiana Purchase, and this is the fact that the French were up here is the reason why we have Québécois. France is the queen of never letting stuff go. Yeah, that's why they have a whole government branch dedicated to preserving their language as it is right now. You'll never have no cap or its French equivalent being added into the French lexicon. They still have colonies. No, they still have colonies for sure. Yeah, though they used to have more, of course. I've heard their Western African possessions post-war described as a hidden empire. Well, guys, they were still intervening in Burkina Faso's politics to get Thomas Sankara assassinated in the 1980s. Isn't the wife of Sankara still alive? She's still alive! She's only 69. Nice. That's how recent we're talking. This was the wife of Thomas Sankara. Like, Thomas Sankara died recently enough for us to have photos of this quality looking at him. Look at that. Look at his cool... What are these called? Garlands? Is that what they're called? The wreath of flowers around your neck? That's correct, right? Or is a garland when it's on your head, like a crown? A lei. That's right. A lei is when it's around your neck. A garland is when it's on your head, correct? Aren't lei Hawaiian? Well, I'm sure there are plenty of cultures that will put flowers around your neck, right? I don't know. Anyway, the point that I'm getting at is that France is bad. Okay, yeah, like... all the places that they still have. Is this listed in order of removal? They still have all these islands. In Africa, listen to this. In Africa, they got out of French Algeria in 1962, the Protectorate of Tunisia in 1956, the Protectorate in Morocco in 1956, the military territory of Fizan Gadames in 1951, Ivory Coast 1960, Dahomey or French Dahomey, now Benin, 1960, French Sudan 1960, Guinea or French Guinea 1958, Mauritania 1960, Burkina Faso 1960, but they were still involved in Thomas Sankara's assassination, which was in the 80s. Senegal 1960, French Togoland, now Togo 1960. Like it's like everything. And they're all decades after World War II ended. Yeah, they still have a ton of influence over a lot of these countries. A lot of them still speak French, you know. Look at Portugal's colonies in Africa, too. Oh, hold on. We can only do this for... Listen, okay, my hatred for the French is greater than my hatred for the Portuguese. Though they both work for it, you know. Basically, all of them still speak French. Yeah. Oh, speaking of Africa, didn't something happen recently in Nigeria? Nigerian election. What to know about the vote in Africa's largest democracy. That's right. They had a big election. I saw there was a Twitter video of a guy opening a car door to open the door of a guy who opened the car door of the president. Millions of Nigerians. Okay, so really quickly, because we're all Americans here, and that means that we're all racist. So let's remind ourselves super quickly that Nigeria is a real country. It's not a fake country. It's a real country. With a square area of about 1 million square kilometers and a population of about 225 million. It is a larger population than basically any Western European country. Does Germany? What is the population of Germany again? 83. Okay, it has 3 times the population of Germany. My apologies. So it is by far larger than any Western European country. It is, sizable, more close to the United States. It is a huge country, GDP of $500 billion, which, again, for an African country is, we're outscaling our neighbors, at least. It's considered a middle power. So, the last 8 years have been particularly bleak for many in Africa's most populous country, estimated more than 200 million. Oh, okay, well, I could have read a little bit further. Economic insecurity. Crises. 2/3 of the population now live in poverty. Almost half of young people are unemployed, with millions of job losses since outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari's government took office in 2015. The value of Nigeria's currency, the naira, has tanked while inflation has soared and oil production has plummeted. Cool. There are continuous threats from terrorists and Islamic groups in the north and central regions of Nigeria and from secessionist groups in the southeast. The number of kidnapping attacks around the country has soared, rising as the economy has worsened. Wow, this guy looks miserable. Oh my god. I don't think I could project this much misery in a facial expression if I tried. Bleak prospects for a young population with a median age of under 19 have spurred a Japa wave, rising numbers seeking to leave the country in search of a better life. All the major candidates, even for the ruling party, agree some form of change is urgent. The UN estimates the population of Nigeria, currently the 6th largest in the world, could grow to be tied with the US as 3rd biggest by 2050. Whether the country moves forward or regresses, its future will be consequential around the world. Keep an eye on Africa as time goes on. Africa is a growing power and will only grow more prominent in geopolitics. It's only a matter of time before a kind of like African trade union or like a transcontinental economic bloc stops being just sort of an abstract intermedial thing and starts being a real global power. And it'll happen within many of our lifetimes, for sure. Yeah, the African Union exists, but it's not like the EU or something. A lot of the many like internal African alliances and unifications, they're mostly about moderating intra-African politics. Like they don't have much global influence, at least not compared to a lot of other like OPEC or the EU or whatever else. But that will change. That will change. That will change. President Buhari is wrapping up his second term and cannot run again. He seems happy, so that's good, I guess. 70-year-old Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a former governor of Lagos State and one of the most powerful politicians in Nigeria, is running for the All Progressives Congress, the APC, Buhari's governing party. He's Muslim from the majority Yoruba Southwest and is a hugely divisive figure. Vaush, India, has been trying to become more globally relevant for a long time, so it's not 100% sure a country will become relevant just because of its high population. But India is very relevant. It's not relevant as much as you would expect for its population, but soon it will outpace China as the most populous country in the world. And India is making an effort to consolidate on its population to become insanely powerful. Wait, it already has? More than China? 1.408 billion, as opposed to... Nope! China is still 4 million ahead, which means that actually this number could tick over any day. This could actually tick over like within a few weeks. Oh wait, this is from 2021? Wait. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. India's current population is 1.415 billion. You okay? Okay, nice. Wait. Wikipedia still says that it's the second most populous country. Wait. Okay, when I look up most populous country, it just puts India and China next to each other, like they're tied. Not surprisingly, the largest countries in the world in terms of population are China and India. Okay, the real answer is that we don't do censuses every single day, and the current day-to-day populations are just estimates based on previous growth models, which means that right now we're probably in a period of ambiguity where it could be either China or India, and we don't actually know which one has more, but China's population is growing slower than India's, meaning that right now, either now or soon, India will have more people, and that's almost inevitable. Basically, nothing can change that.